Welcome to another episode of Viatorian Voices, Conversations on the Way. Have you ever wondered how a priest becomes a priest? There's vocational discernment and prayer, of course, but what's the process? What do they study? What experience do they get? How do they prepare and get ready? In this episode, we'll discuss the path of theological studies and priestly formation with the man who will soon become our community's newest priest, Brother John Eustice. John professed first vows as a Viatorian in 2005. He has served in parish pastoral ministry, campus youth and young adult ministries, and in leadership as an administrator at St. Viator High School and as director of vocation ministry for Viatorians in the U.S. A few years ago, after discerning God's invitation to priesthood and talking with community leadership, Brother John began studies at Viatorian-sponsored Catholic Theological Union in Chicago with an eye to priestly ordination. He was ordained a transitional deacon in June 2023, and he's now completed his Master's in Divinity degree and plan of formation for priesthood. John will be ordained to the priesthood in June 2024 at St. Thomas More Catholic Community in Henderson, Nevada, where he grew up. In related news, Brother Giovanni Orduz was ordained a transitional deacon in April 2024, and he is on track for priestly ordination in the near future. I'm Pre-Associate Dan Masterton, and I'll be your host for this episode. I'm also a CTU alumnus, so I speak inclusively of our time studying there. Brother John and I had the chance to talk during a break on a pastoral visit to Las Vegas for some youth events. We sat in the backyard at a Viatorian residence, so you may hear some of the natural sound from the skies and trees of our outdoor recording studio. We'll let you decide whether our discourse is truly soaring or if those are just airplanes above our heads in the Las Vegas flight paths, and whether or not Brother John has the St. Francis effect of animals flocking to him for preaching. To begin, I asked Brother John to describe his course of study to prepare for priesthood, including why he doesn't necessarily use the term seminary in the usual way. Enjoy the conversation.
A lot of people look at the terminology of seminary as, you go away to some place. But we as Viatorians and even other religious communities who go to Catholic Theological Union might view it a little bit more as theological preparation rather than seminary. Because seminary implies that you're residentially in with other seminarians. Well, we've already had that formation. I've had that as a brother, temporary vows and perpetual vows, and I've been perpetually professed now since 2008. So, and also fortunately, quite a bit of ministerial experience, whether as a youth minister, young adult minister, campus minister, or also ministering in Belize as a pastoral associate. So that comes in as part of my education as I enter theological studies, looking at being ordained as a presbyter in the church. So at Catholic Theological Union then, the preparation I'm receiving, one, is how to think well. I never thought myself as a good thinker, but apparently that sometimes it needs to happen. And so before you even really get started, it's important to have a good base of philosophy. So I only had one course of philosophy at UNLV, and so I needed to take 6 more at CTU. But it really adapted the way I view questions and how I question the world around me. So for 6 courses, there was philosophy of death, philosophy of science and religion, and then also the classics like looking at Aristotle and Plato and Augustine and Aquinas, etc. So that really helps to set a foundation for being able to think through a lot of the history and theology of the church. So other areas then that are involved with preparation for priesthood, the theological preparation for priesthood, are looking at the dogmatic understanding of the church. What are the underpinning truths that the church holds? And quite honestly, for me, those are not the courses that really, really excite me, but I know they're important. So looking at theological anthropology, if you ask me to answer what that means, I really can't do that yet. But looking at also Christology, so that means what's my view of Christ? Is Christ this magical person, or is this Christ this incarnate person that I can relate to? And everywhere in between those two ends of the spectrum. And then also who or what is the Trinity, and how does that affect life? So part of the theological preparation is understanding that there is Jesus of Nazareth, a historical person, But then what's left in the aftermath of that is Christ. And Christ that through the Holy Spirit, by the will of God, operates in every part of our life now. And as a future preacher, homilist, well, not future, I'm a deacon now, so I am a homilist, but and no matter how I present the faith, I have to know that the whole Trinity is involved in it. And so there's been a fine-tuning. I mean, I've known all this to some extent, but there's been a fine-tuning for me of how to articulate that, how to live that out, not only through words and homilies, but through my presence among people, whether it's in a classroom or serving people in a soup line or just being present to people.
Would you say a bit too about like the sacramental preparation that you get, to be a priest and celebrate the sacraments? You have to kind of practice it a little bit in addition to studying it. And so I think of like undergrad classes where you have lecture, but then you also have like a discussion or a tutorial or a lab session. That's kind of true in your studies now in preparation for priesthood too. So can you explain a little bit about that practice that you get with your classmates?
Sure. Let me give you a little anecdote here. I work with young adults in Bourbonnais. Most of them go to Olivet Nazarene University, which is right next to Maternity of the Blessed Virgin Mary Parish. And on Sunday evenings, we have the Catholic Underground, which meets in the basement of the rectory. So it's kind of a cool thing. Oftentimes, they ask me tons of questions about Mass or about different things that we do, the sacraments. And I'll say, hold please, and then I'll go and get a book. And they say, oh, of course, there's a book for that. Well, there is. And the red book that you see the priest using at Mass, which is called the Roman Missal, has all the instructions that you ever need to be able to not only celebrate the Mass well or celebrate other sacraments well, but there's a theology behind it. And it's necessary for us to actually read it and then practice doing it. It's like maybe you've had an experience where you see somebody perform something and say, oh, that's easy. And then let me get up there. And then you turn around and now you're in the principal role and you're doing opposite of what you're used to seeing for years and years and years. Well, I can tell you my first time going up in front when the professor said, now, Eustice, get up there and do the introductory rites for the Mass. All right. So I did. And I whiffed it. And I kept whiffing it. He kept saying, no, you missed this part. No, you missed that part. I just started laughing because it's like, how long have I been Catholic? Well, I have been officially enrolled since June 25th, 1978 in my baptism, and I've been seeing this my entire life, yet being in the other side of the conversation, because that's what liturgy is, that's what Mass is with the priest and the people, it's conversation. I didn't really know that part too well. So it's good that, we break it down, we look at what's going on, what's being represented, and you try it on for size, and you trip, you stumble, you try again. And now I can articulate this. I think most people, when they see Mass, they're not going to say, oh, he's following the rubrics that are in the book correctly. I think most people are going to say something like this. Yeah, Mass was fine. Or they might say, wow, I really like the way Father so-and-so presides at Mass. And my suspicion is when they say that about that priest, it's because he's not only done the rubrics, done what's written in the book well, but he's internalized it and really lets it become a prayer and makes it clear for the people. These liturgies have been around for a long, long time, and I've been learning it's the responsibility of the one who's presiding to be true to that, but also to add his own personality. So over this last year at Catholic Theological Union, I'm able to really practice this and try this out for all the sacraments and get familiar with them enough that it seems, not only that it seems natural, but it is natural, coming from my personality, from the words on the pages that have been developed so many years ago.
Can we backtrack just a moment to CTU as an institution and a community? It's this unique seminary, but also graduate school of theology and ministry that the Viatorians have been involved with for decades. And I think sometimes we think of seminaries as these big, gated campuses tucked away where a bunch of men go to prepare for priesthood. CTU is different in that regard, that we have these 20 plus religious communities who sponsor it together and send men and women there for formation together. We also have lay people studying there. We have continuing education, people who are in volunteer work or a second part of their lives studying theology, and you get a unique and international multicultural quote-unquote seminary experience by going to this graduate school union on the south side of Chicago in an urban setting. How would you describe CTU from your experience there as a student for all these years?
Well, first of all, when I have a hankering for a donut, there's Stan's Donut right around the corner, and I engage in that, which is probably not good for my waistline, which, anyway, I digress. But, and they have good coffee too. And Stan's Donuts is not paying for a plug on this, I don't think. Check the show
We'll check with them.
But, no, the advantage is you're right on a regular street in Chicago. You walk into this place, which is now also the home to Lutheran School of Theology and the McCormick Presbyterian School of Theology. So you have an ecumenical sense of all three different Christian traditions coming together under one roof, as well as at CTU they have the Islam Christian studies, and they also have the Jewish Christian or Catholic studies. So you really have all the Abrahamic religions under one roof there. And that's significant because the world in which I'm entering as an ordained minister is a world that is interfaith. It's a world that is not compartmentalized, but it's a world that, especially in the United States, we need to interact with one another and recognize that we're all children of God and that we have different expressions, faith expressions, religious expressions of that faith in God. But back to the Catholic bubble that's on the third floor at that building. It's just amazing. I'm in classes with people who are from India, from Tanzania and Kenya and Colombia and China and Myanmar. There's two other guys who are from Myanmar that don't have a huge Christian population, much less Catholic population. And some sisters from South Korea and Burundi, and I mean, the list goes on and on and on, even Europe as well. So it's an amazing expression of the world. I think I really believe it's something like Pentecost, with all the languages being spoken, all the cultures being represented. And I get to see it on an everyday basis as I'm studying who we say God is and how God engages us. And it's like, okay, here it is right in front of me, sitting next to me, sitting in front of me, challenging me in my thoughts, behind me on what I just said. And it's not only, like you said, it's not only those of us preparing for ordination, it's the voice of the church. And not only our church, but it's the voice of faith in the entire world that comes under one address.
And then kind of going forth from CTU, you have this wonderful community in which you're studying and learning these things. But then, the church, the bishops, the Viatorian leadership establish this plan for formation, and you have parts that go beyond just studies and papers and presentations to do actual practice to prepare you for priesthood too. So can you talk about the things that you do outside of the classroom that are part of this process of formation that will kind of help prepare you for other areas of what's awaiting you in priesthood too?
Again, I reach back into my almost 20 years as a brother. That's been part of that formation as well. But it's really engaging people. For example, this year I'm serving as a transitional deacon at Maternity Parish in Bourbonnais, and part of it is homily preparation. And how do you do that? You listen to what's going on in people's lives. You try to know what's going on in the world today, and then you try to line up the people you're working with what's going on in the world with our faith tradition. So it's really my responsibility is to make sure I have a prayer life, an everyday prayer life, to make sure that before I give a homily, I need to sit with it, I need to listen, I need to jot down some ideas. A good friend of mine from the Archdiocese now of Las Vegas, Father Bob Stokig, mentioned when he prepares homilies, he says, I need 1 hour for every minute I preach. And it's necessary to take that time to really digest it, make it your own, and then encourage and preach on the word that was just heard. So that's a piece of it. Another piece is just being with people. What are some other areas of preparation? It's who am I in the world and who am I called to be as minister in the world? One of the final projects at CTU is, and this is actually for all priesthood candidates, you need to come up with a ministry of, or a theology of ministry statement. And so it's just important to take a look at where I've been and what I'm doing now and where I'm going. And mine kind of looks at, I look at it through the lens of one of my passions, and that's going for a hike on a trail. And I know that on that trail, I'm going to encounter people, and I know that I have not reached the summit, and I know I'm going to meet people who have, or I know I'm going to meet people who are struggling. And on this path of life, I'm also going to learn from those that I encounter. Preparation for ordination, I think, is essential to know that I haven't arrived, and I never will, and that I too am somebody who's on this faith-driven journey, seeking Christ in the world, and hopefully pointing towards Christ in the world as well. So I know that's a nebulous way of looking at it, but yeah.
You're talking about people who are close to the summit. I think of those who were very ill or who are even actively dying, who you served as a hospital chaplain during this period of preparation, and the hours you spent on long shifts, even 24-hour overnight shifts, and in acute care and emergency settings where people were facing significant, fresh, bad news about loved ones, and you were asked to come into the room and be with them. Can you just tell us a little bit what that was like and how that impacted you as you go through this stage?
Yeah, I remember one young man in his 30s had aspirated, also had asthma, and so basically he stopped breathing for a significant amount of time. They revived him, but he was on a ventilator, and the family basically came to the decision that we need to take him off of life support, and I happened to be there at that time, and it was a case of me just being present. But as I'm present there, I also bring my own self into the hospital room too, and I'm realizing, okay, I've had it where my own father was in hospice care, and we were letting him go, and I had an experience where my brother, his life was touch and go for a number of months when he was in the hospital after an accident. So I bring that into the room, but while I'm there, I need to acknowledge that that's present in my life, and then kind of package it up nicely and carefully and set it in a duffel bag in the hallway outside and say, okay, this is not my brother, this is not my father, but this is this family with this situation, and let them guide me in what I need to do. And I can remember the father, he was taking charge, so I knew to just wait. And then when it was time, he turned to me and he says, okay, you can pray now. Okay. So I did, and I was with the family when they turned off the machine, and as their loved one in his mid-30s fades away, and I was just there as an assurance that this is real and that God was present. And there's numerous times where that happened. So yeah, being in that position, in the fragile state of people's lives, with being a person who says, this is real, but so is God, and help me, I will be here to help you know that at least somebody is keeping God in mind throughout this whole experience. And I hope that's something I bring into every part of my ministry.
Yeah, so piecing all that together, you have this time in campus ministry, youth ministry, young adult ministry, helping steward parishes and schools, spending time in studies, and all of this is as a religious brother. Like, we are a congregation where some men go into priesthood quite early in religious life, some men go into priesthood quite late in religious life, then you're sort of in between maybe after 20 years or so. And it creates a diversity of kind of expression of religious life and expression of priesthood, because each of you bring a unique trajectory into that moment of ordination and the ministry that follows. So how would you look back on your arc through formation in religious life to here, and how it will point you forward into what's to come?
Yeah, I had the opportunity literally yesterday, the LA Youth Conference, or Youth Day. I met a transitional deacon from the Archdiocese of LA, and he's going to be ordained a priest in June, as will I. And he's excited to get into professional ministry, and I was sharing with him what you just stated about my life, and I was able to tell him, you know, life as a brother has been a way to be a role model for all lay people, and I think every priest should know this, that we are all called, those who are ordained to priesthood are called to remember that we've been baptized into this big family, and that never leaves us, and that we are responsible for inviting others into that baptism as well, and to live out ministries kind of like what I've been doing, but also to be able to provide the sacraments, to bring the language, to bring the presence, to bring the understanding that God, through Christ and the Holy Spirit, is present in all we do. And my hope is, as this new ministry that's coming up for me, that however I am present really sparks the faith of everybody. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the people of God, and for the people of God and Christ to kind of be a good team, to make, peace on earth. I know that sounds trite, but it really is to bring the love of God to people today who need it, because as we all know, there's so many issues out there. And if the experiences of my formation and the way I was ministering can assist in a very public way and inspire people to listen to God more deeply, then I think that's what I try to bring to this new ministry. And retirement is when I'm dead.
So, speaking of people who are still living, what might you say to a young person who is considering a path like yours, whether it means going to theological studies a bit later on in life, or maybe going kind of soon, maybe just after early formation in religious life or in a diocese? What would you say to a young person considering priesthood and the path of theological studies that prepares you for it? What kind of insight could you lend from your experience in it these last few years?
First of all, what do you have to lose? Just try it out. You're not going into a holier life. I know some people think priesthood is like, oh, that's just for holy people. No, it's for people full of holes. Yeah. Oh, you're so holy. Yeah, I know, like my genes. But, don't take yourself too seriously, but try it out. Go explore. You'll kind of know, maybe. And that realize that you're not above anybody. But don't wait. I mean, if you have things that you need to deal with, whether through your own emotional well-being, or there might be some things that haven't been resolved yet in your own life, well, go pay attention to that. Work with a vocation director, work with a counselor on that. But then keep moving through it. If you're waiting for a lightning bolt, it's not going to come. God gives you desire, God gives you an intellect, God gives you experiences. Don't wait for God to give you anything else. If you've got this desire, go check it out and you'll find out.
That's all for this episode. We thank Brother John for his witness and pray for his ongoing ministry as a Viatorian, now serving the people of God as a priest. Viatorian Voices, Conversations on the Way is a production of Viatorian Vocation Ministry. The Viatorians are professed brothers and priests, together with women and men lay associates, who proclaim Jesus Christ and his gospel and raise communities where faith is lived, deepened, and celebrated. In the footsteps of Venerable Louis Querbes and under the patronage of St. Viator, we strive to do everything well, so that through us, Jesus may be adored and loved. To learn more about our community, visit Viatorians.com or follow us on social media at Viatorian USA. Those seeking support and accompaniment in exploring God's invitation for them are invited to reach out to Vocation Ministry. Send us a DM on social media or email vocations@Viatorians.com to start a conversation. On behalf of Brother Peter and the Viatorian community, I'm Pre-Associate Dan Masterton. Venerable Louis Querbes, inspire us. St. Viator, pray for us. Adored and loved be Jesus.